Is this all right? Yeah. Okay. First of all, of course, I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity tonight to present some of the work and activism we have done over the last years, and especially want to thank the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation for bringing me here. And it was good that I came some days earlier, I think, because it was a good chance to learn a bit more about the situation here in Israel. I must say I have thought about readjusting my presentation a little bit. You have a small handout of what I initially planned to say, but I think over the last days we had very interesting, very intensive discussions about what is going on. So let me perhaps focus on one particular bit a bit more than I originally intended, or from the faraway picture I had. But okay, we'll see about this. Now Maya was so kind to introduce me as an activist, which is right, absolutely. In other circumstances, I would rather perhaps present myself as an academic or perhaps as an NGO representative. I think we're very fluid in these things. I think it is important to move in different fields, because if you want to be pragmatic, if you want to win, I think you have to employ all the means that you can use and that you have at your hands. So, but why am I still happy that Maya introduced me as an activist? It's how I feel in my heart. After all, it is what I am. And I think there's something very important in it, because it means that if you fight, you can win. And I think it offers like some immediate hope that it's worth being active, being an activist. Because what I've been doing over the last 10 years with my friends and colleagues and comrades, it really shows that if you start to move, you do get to some point. And I think this is what is driving me on forwards, and I think this is something I would like to be able to convey in this talk a little bit. Okay, so much for that. I think I want to talk a little bit about the situation in Germany, or to be more precise, about the situation in Bavaria, where I come from, where I've been living for the last 10 years. But I think it's also important to broaden the issue a little bit, because I think Bavaria, Germany, is a very specific situation. It's the north of Europe. It has some very particular setup. And I have already understood that there is this general idea, perhaps, that in Europe things are different or are better. And I think especially if you look towards the south, like concerning refugees, concerning asylum procedures, especially if you look to the south, I think this is less true. I wouldn't say that it's much worse in the south. It's different. And I think it's important to give this picture, to say that Europe is not Europe. If you get closer to it, you see how different, how fragmented it is. So I would like to add a little bit of information about Italy and about Greece, where I currently live. And in the end, I think we should be able to come to a discussion now how all of this, what I said, and like the examples I've been given, perhaps it's possible to apply them here or to take them as an inspiration, and perhaps we can engage in some kind of discussion to see what can we make out of this? Again, the activist bit. Let's not only talk about it, let's actually start moving. Let's get somewhere and see where it leads us, I believe, for something better. Yeah. So let me start with Munich, with Bavaria, with Germany. There I'm involved with a group which is called the Caravan for the Rights of Refugees and Migrants. It dates back to 1998, and it was a very spontaneous, I guess, attempt to form some kind of refugee self-organization in Germany. It was inspired by the struggles of the sans-papiers, the people without papers, in France, who had, during the 90s, often formed collectives. This is illegalized migrants in France, most often from the colonies, from the former colonies, especially West Africa, who had been living in France for a long time and who had the impression, okay, we are here, our children have been born here, we're actually citizens, we're working, we're paying taxes, we're paying social welfare. Okay, we don't get anything in return, and we have no rights. The French state does not recognize us. It's time to stand up and claim these rights, because we are here and we're here to stay, and this should be recognized finally. So they started forming collectives, occupying churches, bringing their situation to the public. And I think what might perhaps be interesting in the Israeli context is that I think the strongest move into the public was when they were talking about what the French state was actually offering them. That was deportation back to West Africa. And they said they drew the line back to the Second World War, to the involvement of France, of the Vichy regime in the deportation of Jews. And they said, no, let's talk about this. This is a historical parallel, or they kind of offered this as a discussion, and they said, let's talk about this. What is it about deporting people from the country where they have been living before? Now, this inspired the caravan in Germany. It's a very different situation in Germany. If you talk about labor migration, you talk about the 1970s. If you talk about illegalized migrants in Germany, it's something very different than to the French system. In Germany, basically, if you were trying to migrate to Germany in the 90s or now in the 2000s, you would go through the asylum process. And you would become, or you would be, that's open to everybody self, a refugee. So it was not about forming collectives of illegalized migrants. It was rather much more forming an organization. And so in 1998, 1998 is kind of a historical year for Germany because the 16-year rule of the Conservative Party ended. There was this big election campaign. Everybody was saying, the Social Democrats are going to come into power. Finally, things will move into a better direction. Okay, Social Democrats behaved as they always did, but anyways. For the refugees, they said, okay, everybody's talking about the election, but we live here, but we don't have any vote. So there's no point for us getting involved into this election campaign, and that was the slogan of the caravan, was, we have no vote, but a voice. And that is exactly what the caravan did. It raised the voice of the refugees. It put together a collective of, it was varying between 50 and 100 people, and the caravan traveled 40 cities in Germany and saying, yeah, we'll come to the main squares, we'll inform people. I think it's very much what Gabriel was telling. This is very important to bring out the information. People, you need to know, this is Germany, we also live here. We are here with our children, we are deprived of our rights. You need to recognize this, and the situation needs to change. And after this caravan happened, a lot of groups remained in the various of these 40 cities, not 40 groups, but in the main cities you had groups like this. And my group, for example, in Munich, it decided from the beginning that it would not be a purely only refugee self-organization. Some other caravan groups follow that model, and I think it's as valid as what we do. In Munich, we decided to work together. We said, there's no point in separating. That's everybody who wants to fight, to struggle, to campaign for the rights of refugees and migrants. Let's get together and see what we can achieve. And that's basically still how my group is working. We don't ask for passport, for origin, for legal status. For us, it's important to sit together as one, because we have one common goal, and discuss and to learn. And then we decide what we're going to do about it. Now, over these 10 years, we have done a lot of things, but I think I would like to focus on one campaign we carried out in 2005, because I've heard that the issue of the impeding deportation of South Sudanese refugees is kind of something that is being discussed right now. In 2005, we were faced with a similar situation, in 2004. In 2003, one family came to us from Togo, West Africa. They had been living in Munich for a long time. Their 2 children were born in Munich. They were speaking better German than anything else. And okay, they were threatened with deportation. And we put up a long struggle over the summer, and finally they managed to stay. So we thought we had done this. But then in spring 2004, another family came to us and said, yeah, well, we also received this letter about, you will be deported to Togo soon. And we thought, now this is strange. What's happening there? And actually we heard from more people that this is happening. So we said, I think very much, also again, I think what Gabriel was telling is a great example of what can be done and what can be achieved. We said, yeah, okay, people, why don't you get organized? Come together, discuss the issue of the deportations that are kind of threatened, and let's come up with a plan. And there was this little hitch in there. It was in spring, and it took a long time for this to happen, because somehow this organization did not exist. Most of the Togolese men were organized in parties. They were very active in exile politics against the dictator Eyadema back then. But somehow this whole issue of deportation, about being able to stay in Germany, it didn't catch on with these parties. It was only when we met with the women's organization, the Association des Femmes Togolaises en Allemagne, the women's organization from Togo, and they said, yeah, this is a problem. We really need to talk about it now. And they were the first who actually managed to bring everybody together to talk about this problem. And I think this is something very, very important. Most families kind of felt ashamed in Germany that they had this kind of, they perceived it as an individual problem. They would hope that would go away, or they would find a way around. And now the initiative of the Women's Association transformed into a collective problem, because suddenly it was visible. Yeah, it's not only just my family being threatened by deportation. It was 20 families stood up and said, yes, we have this problem. And that kind of formed a very different power suddenly, because there was this collectivity and this common goal of, no, we will stay here. We and our kids, we will not be deported from Germany, from Munich, where we have been living for the last 10, 20 years, I don't know how long. Okay. So we tried to put this issue to the public. It was not easy in the beginning. The newspapers were not interested. So in the end, we decided to occupy one of the main squares in Munich, very much in line with German association law. But anyways, we were there for 5 days. We were present. And suddenly people, you know, they couldn't ignore it anymore. We were there. The Association of the Women was there, all the refugees and the activists. We set up tents. Not as big as last year here in the Rothschild in Lewinsky, but okay, we were there, and it suddenly became an issue. And it was strange, because suddenly the authorities started changing their opinion about it. Because before they just said, I don't think that they were particularly mean or something like this. They were saying, yeah, they're foreigners, they have to go because this is Germany and there's only Germans living here. That it was not the case. They said, but the law is that they have to go. And when we started applying pressure and saying, yeah, but okay, the law is like this, but you also have to consider that the children have been born here. These people are, if not by law, but factually, they are citizens of Munich. You know, they belong here. The authorities started thinking the other way. They actually told us, you know, this protest made us think the other way. That's what they told us. And they found a little legal loophole that kind of allowed them to hand out a residence permit, and suddenly, at the end of the summer, all these 20 families could stay. They could leave the precarious legal status, which is comparable to the conditional release visa, Duldung, toleration, it's called in German. And actually, it was not only these 20 families, but okay, this legal loophole had been found, and altogether, I would say around 100 families in Munich managed to legalize themselves properly. Like, they have residents, they are staying, they will never go again unless they wish to. There was kind of, I think, a very huge success. And it's something I can tell in 5 minutes now, but in the beginning, when we were faced with this whole problem of the impeding deportations, we were also thinking, yeah, how are we going to stop this? Our whole experience with deportations was that we were trying, sometimes in very rare cases, we're trying like a last-ditch attempt. We would put somebody on the plane to alert the passengers that, hey, there's a deportation going on. There's somebody in the back. He's not really willing to fly, or she's not willing to fly. Please do something. Talk to the captain. You know, make this go away. That was kind of something very desperate. We also did at some times. But this situation now, I think it was very much different, because we started acting much earlier. We knew there was a threat, but you know, the executive didn't move yet. There was like, they said, we're thinking about this. We started thinking what to do about it, and I think we managed to turn this thing around. And I think for all of us, it was a very, very important lesson that, you know, organizing, getting together, organizing collectively and making plans together and putting forward the demands, it can work very well. I think it can turn around the opinion of the public. That's like one thing we're doing. Now lately we have been focusing on, sorry, where am I in the time? Ah, I'm halfway through, okay, wow, that went fast. Okay, lately we have been organizing still around the issue of the living conditions of refugees in Bavaria, which are, it's interesting to say, if you look at the situation here in Tel Aviv, for example, or if you look at the situation in Greece and in Italy, you would say, yeah, it's much better. You know, refugees, there's a shelter for refugees, there's food, there's what is called pocket money, 40 euros, what is that, 200 shekels a month. And so it sounds much better, you know, their basic needs are taken care of. But our problem, I think, in Munich, in Bavaria, and actually it applies to whole of Germany, is still that refugees are being treated as not subjects, you know, it's not important what they want. For example, if you talk about the food, you don't give money so people can buy the food they want. Yeah, twice a week you get a box of food. So it's kind of, it's a fundamental disregard of the subjectivity and the intentions of the refugees. And that's the problem to us. I could elaborate on this, but as I said, I would like to move on a little bit to the whole European situation. Because even that things seem better in Germany, and even that the recognition rate for refugees or subsidiary or humanitarian protection is given much more. I think we have a rate of altogether 60% in Germany. The actual problem is that not very many people do actually reach Germany these days. And I think it's very much what Jens was describing yesterday. There's a European reality to this whole thing. There's a European external border. Germany practically does not have a part of the external border anymore. Okay, the airports and the ports, like somebody said on Sunday, Ben Gurion is, for example, is one of the hotspots on the border. That applies to the Munich airport, to Frankfurt and Köln airport, just the same. But basically, this is people who have invested a lot of money for a visa and a flight to come directly to Germany. And I think they stand a good chance to apply for asylum and actually do get a recognition. But most people get stuck at the external border, that is, or which has been for a long time around the Mediterranean. Jens was describing on Sunday very well what happened around the Mediterranean, how it was closed. And we were discussing today, I think it's not a coincidence that much more refugees are coming to Israel these days. It's not possible these days very well to cross the Mediterranean. People have to take the land route, and you can see that around 2007, 2008, much more refugees are trying to cross from Turkey into Greece. And in Greece, the situation is fundamentally different. Greece, for a long time, had like the position of, we don't really care, you know. There was this famous, it is kind of famous, white paper, which all refugees received once they had crossed the border. And I have to say this very clearly, the border between Turkey and Greece, it was basically open. It was possible to cross over. The Greek authorities, they took the refugees, put them into detention for 3 months, horrible detention, no doubt about this, but it was limited to 3 months, and then they would hand out this white paper which says, you have 30 days to leave Greece in a direction you choose, which usually under the law you would interpret as, you know, leave Europe, go back to Turkey or wherever you've come from. But it really said, whatever direction you choose, and most refugees obviously chose the direction north, going to Germany, to Austria, to France, all the countries. And I think the Greek government was pretty much happy with this. You know, everybody got what they wanted. The Greek government didn't have to put up an asylum system. Refugees could travel on. So it was a good situation, I think. But this is when, around 2007, 2006, the northern states start to apply this pressure. You know, you have to build an asylum system, and what had been mentioned, this Dublin II system, which governs inside Europe which state is responsible for handling an asylum application. And it basically mandates a principle of causation. That means the member state of Europe, of the European Union, which has caused the entrance of a refugee also needs to make the asylum application. And causing an entry means either giving a visa or not guarding the border well enough. And this is enforced by deportations. Like if a refugee comes to Germany, they will take his fingerprints. There's a European fingerprint database, especially for refugees and foreigners. They will see, well, you were in Greece 2 months ago, so we will deport you to Greece. You can make your asylum claim there, which was a big joke because there was no asylum system in Greece. And I think the situation is very much alike to what is going on in Tel Aviv here. There is no shelter. The government is not doing anything really. If there was some support, it was courageous citizens who wanted to do something about it, who were handing out food, or the churches, for example. People were living in, I think, in very similar circumstances like what I have seen here in Tel Aviv in the few days that I have been here. So we started organizing around this issue too, because we felt now the border had moved away from Germany. We have to follow the border. We have to continue what our anti-racist activism. And we put a lot of effort. We made what we call a no-border camp. We went to one island of Greece for 5 days, for 10 days, with 500 people. So we raised a lot of attention to the detention conditions there and to what is happening with the refugees. We were very lucky because we somehow managed to smuggle a camera into the detention center. We got it out again. At some point it went viral and Reuters and CNN picked it up. One day we got a call from the United States. Hey, we saw you on CNN just now. What is going on? And from that point, that detention center was basically doomed to be shut down, which happened 2 months later. And a lot of people were released. We managed to help a lot of people not even to get into the arms of the police. And we started keeping in contact with them, you know, email and phones and all this, and trying to help people along their way through Europe, facing the different problems they had. And I think we have been fairly successful keeping people in the different countries where they chose to go, because this is what is important to us. Dublin II says who is responsible. We don't care, because if a refugee says, I want to go to Scandinavia, say Sweden, because my aunt is living there, okay, you got a good reason to go to Sweden. Why should you argue with this? And this whole Dublin II convention regulation in Europe, it is again the same issue. It does not take into account the subjectivity of refugees. So this is stuff we have been doing. How long? 10 minutes, okay. And I think it was this whole idea of this no-border camp, it was not the first one. It had happened in 1998 before, and there had been basically one of these camps every year in various areas. Like the first idea was to go to the German-Polish border back then, 1998. It was still the European external border. Poland was not in the EU. It was where the German police was hunting refugees, I think there was a policy of hot returns as well. It's very comparable. So the whole idea was to go there for a week with like 100, 200 activists and to say, hey, look what is happening here. You know, somebody needs to see this. Actually, a lot of people need to see this. And to say, at least for a week, we can disturb what is happening here at the borders. And it has kind of become a very continuous practice. And I think in the beginning it was an activity very much of German activists because it's very confrontative. But over the last years, I think the movement has learned, and kind of the different movements, the self-organization of refugees and the German activists, they have learned how it's possible to combine it. I'm not saying that it's easy, and it's always a lot of discussions. But if there's one thing I can say about it, that is, it's worth it. It's really a very good process sitting together at one table, not only once, but like every week, and like exchanging the different perspectives and exchanging how things are to be seen and talking about strategy and talking about aims, and then actually to move together. So that is the one thing that we have learned from the last years of activism. And I think you can never be wrong if you try to move together. Okay, but let me conclude with the last bit, perhaps. What I wanted to say is, from my perspective, now I've gone to Greece because, for one, all of this, what has been happening there, what I have described, is still somehow in movement there. But of course, I guess Greece is a kind of different problem now. It has become much bigger. Suddenly it's not the European border which is at stake. Suddenly it's the whole system of the common currency, and there's other things happening. And it made us think also, what does that mean for what we do? And what does it mean why we do stuff, why we are activists? And I think if there's one thing which is in common is like, this is a struggle about social rights. And it's a struggle about, let me call it, in a take on an old system, democracy. Because basically it is the question, who is included? If somebody's in the country, if somebody's living there, shouldn't they have a say? Shouldn't they be included? Shouldn't they be able to receive welfare just as everybody else? And that is the question that is being posed now to us. Let me give you one example. There's this one NGO in Athens. They have been running a clinic, actual medical clinic, for refugees for a long time, because refugees did not have access to the healthcare system. Now, over the last years, they have been faced with a lot of Greek people coming there who also say, hey, I'm unemployed for a long time. I have no access to medical care. Please, I need to be treated. I'm sick. Now, they cannot say, yeah, but you're not a refugee, you know? It's like we have set this thing up for refugee. I mean, what is the idea? The idea is to give medical care to people who don't have access to medical care otherwise. So suddenly these whole categories of refugees, Greeks, European citizens, like Jens was explaining, they're blurring. It's a crisis out there, and a lot of people are affected by it. And I think this is a very important opportunity, perhaps, for us to step in and to say, yes, this is about social rights, this is about democracy in the truest, kind of very ancient, but still very important sense. It's like, include everybody who is here. And if we take serious what Jens said yesterday, on Sunday, for example, is the border itself is creating a space with a population that is being trapped there, like what we heard about the camps in Libya, or people who are being deported back towards the border by the Dublin II system. So if the border is a space itself also, what about democracy at the border? And let me just rephrase the question Jens was saying. Is it possible to have a border that respects the human rights? Perhaps you can go even further and say, yeah, but is there a border that can be democratic? It's not only about states these days, you know. It's about people are moving, people are in various areas. Let's ask the question, can a border be democratic? And from the experience of the European external border, I would say no. Like the way it was running, it could not have been democratic because it's exclusion by definition. That's what a border does. So there's something happening in this world, at least I perceive it this way. There's a new struggle for social rights, for social participation, for political rights, democracy. I don't need to mention, no, like what happened in Tunisia, what happened in Egypt. Of course, the enthusiasm is a bit gone, but still, I think this is what has happened, and it has gripped Greece, it has gripped Spain. There were huge protests in the United States, and I'm forgetting a lot of countries, I think. There is this idea, again, about social rights and political rights, and I think we can include the whole anti-racist issue, we can include it into it. Let me just say, when the Occupy Wall Street movement is talking about the 99%, let us state very, very clearly, yeah, but the 99% don't hold one kind of passport, in this case the United States passport. If you're talking about 99%, let's say, okay, it's everybody. And we don't ask for passport, for origin, for ethnicity or something like this. Let's say this is a movement for everybody, and I think, and I hope, and it's something we try to develop, I think this is the way we have to go if we want to be ultimately successful. My proposition. I think I have to come to an end. I just wanted to say I'm around until Friday morning. I would be most happy if we could continue this discussion. I would be most happy if I didn't speak, but could also hear, and we could discuss a little bit. So I'm happy to share more experiences. So let's take this opportunity if it's there. What I was saying is not the only way. This is the experiences we had. I'm sure we can generate a lot of more experiences of struggle and success. Thank you very much.